Alright, so one of the whiny bitch cops was talking about how he couldn't ever get, like, basically he would essentially find, like, people making videos on dark web, and then to be in those, he would have had to have those speakers, so he didn't want to, like, talk about it and shit. And so then he would attempt to be getting those to be, like, the information, I guess, at the very least, the information to be understood, basically. And that then these people around here essentially were able to constantly be scrubbing the internet of that stuff. And so that's where it came to where they started basically saying, they wouldn't be able to get the information. They would start getting, like, screamed in their speaker for talking about it and shit. And so this is where essentially they were stumbling upon this shit in Tri-Cities, and that they hate those people and they want them busted. They do. And that they are isolated around by these hackers in the same theoretical way that they're attempting with me. But see, there's some slight differences. Is that essentially their uploads pretty much prevent, like, they get fault. Like, I just got this new iPad, okay? Is everybody fucks with my shit? Alright, so instantly I've already seen that they attempt to do this same shit that they would do to those cops that are narking them off. And see, the difference is that when you upload those blackmails, it essentially pushes. See, like, my dark web profile somewhat exists as a ClearNet profile that in ways prevents a lot of, like, abilities to do what they do to all these cops and shit to find this stuff, and women and anybody else, the tech nerds and shit. See, they upload dick suckings and whatever they do. I mean, it essentially. See, somebody made this profile for me, and then it works its way essentially into the architecture of the ClearNet. And so everybody else kind of pushed theirs with a bill, and then that blackmail essentially sits there, preventing it from, like, pushing into the ClearNet system, basically. And so once you're stuck from progressing up more, basically, then that's where their hacker tools and stuff are a lot more, like, effective in the dark web. Okay, so even when these people get brand new devices, I mean, even though mine is theoretically in the ClearNet, it essentially still has little small exploits aspects to it, but essentially, like, red flags, the AIs. You see, what they do in dark web is essentially a copy of AIs. And so what they do in the dark web doesn't necessarily red flag. Like, here I am uploading this stuff to YouTube. See, my profile in ClearNet, the dark web profile that they're hacking into, basically, but that the video is being placed in ClearNet. And so, essentially, their AI, right when I press the upload, already has the whole video instantly. Kind of like their stuff that they have in their dark web that's all instant upload stuff. It's, the AIs are that. This slow upload stuff is because if they did that with everybody on YouTube, it would bog down their AI. But it builds an instant virtualization and then it hard encodes it. So what they attempted to do is it made some error, made it where it wouldn't work. And then the AI started red flagging. Then the AI already has all of the video in a virtualization instantly. And then it sits there knowing that the stupid little black angry face shouldn't be there. I mean, basically. And so it minimizes their abilities to do the isolation of information stuff. And so there's not very many people that can actually do that. A lot of this avoidance of blackmailing into the dark web was made for this purpose, okay? It really was. And so that is one of the things that I know is when I went and did all my sleep education about the AIs, that's the kind of stuff that I knew, that not to block that profile from pushing into essentially the profile. Like, think about it like this. Like, I have a YouTube one. And then there's a dark web profile that essentially builds into it. And then in ways the dark web profile builds into their ClearNet dark web that they have internally at YouTube under their AI. And so that's where most people can't necessarily do that. And that all of those AI profiles had that ability. It's like, it's like even Apple. Basically, there's a ClearNet dark web at Apple. There's a customer profile at Amazon, and they all have a ClearNet dark web internally in their intranet. And so it's configured to be in a darknet architecture. And so that's why I say that it goes into the ClearNet, because most of you people are hackers, and that you people don't necessarily want your profiles going into the corporate dark webs that they have. And so for me, I don't hack, I don't necessarily utilize it in the ways that everybody else on dark web does. And so then, that is where these companies, they don't really care. There'll be people my age that will laugh at the inability of doing what literally most people that have a dark web profile are pretty much able to be scrubbed off of YouTube, basically. And that is kind of what it is. And that there's not really much YouTube can do about that, because they have a ripped off AI, okay, of copy of. And I mean, that is where they're able to pull people in all of their stuff, and then they isolate all of their videos out of the ClearNet inside of their ripped off copy. And so that is what these procedures on the tech silencing Silk Road method. See, that stuff is kind of ineffective for me, because I have a profile that can make its way into their actual dark web. And that they don't, I mean, it's essentially it sits there until they give the okay. They know how to keep it down, they do. And then they just, when people start giving this stuff, I mean, nowadays people that more than likely they'll just want to watch the ultimate fucking stupid. That's my biggest. It's the biggest tech wizard power. The power of people that are the responsible people at these companies that want to watch ultimate fucking stupid. Right? The idea of a tech psycho that can't prevent the literal explanations to his little tech psycho world. That kind of stuff. That's real, they're all tech nerds and shit. That's real tech nerd gold entertainment. Because these fucking nerds around here, they broadcast how they'll be all confident and shit. And then all of a sudden they realize that their little fucking weird button didn't prevent shit. Basically. And then all of a sudden their confidence turns into basically. And that's where, those people spent so many years with that procedure that they do for that shit working on pretty much everybody. It would probably even work on those YouTube server staff down in Oregon also. And that if they were to speak about any of this stuff, for one, they'll probably have speakers. That stuff would get heard by these people in Tri-Cities. It would have. And that they'll get the sound torture, and they're all groomed or whatever. And so if they were to make a video or something, that's where their dark web life profile and shit would have these hackers here that would be able to literally pull a video out of YouTube's own internal staff, dark web stuff. And so that is where this is kind of the reason why this stuff has been lingering for so long, is because of these reasons. It's the only thing that seems to make it into the database that they would be able to see is is all the delusional hacker stuff, okay? See, that stuff is allowed, the even down there, even at Facebook, they talked about all the delusional, gaslighty kind of explanations that all the weird hackers have all the time. That stuff would be allowed or something. But the stuff that I'm talking about, this is that stuff they wouldn't be able to make a video. They would, that's what it is. That would instantly get pulled out, even behind the scenes in their dark web stuff. And so this is where the things that I know is that the power of not corrupting that profile is literally what kind of gives me the ability of doing that stuff. And see, in this town, I yelled right in this area's whole dark web about how nobody should be blackmailing. It was right when they turned on the dark web AI profiles, I told everybody. don't blackmail into it. And that essentially there's a massive issue with everybody having their Silk Road explanation stuff like scrubbed and basically. And that is kind of like where a lot of people couldn't quite explain. See, there was people at the Silk Road bus time that were trying to explain how they weren't really involved with it, but all the video stuff would have seemingly had them like, it would have seemed like they were involved and stuff, and then they would have had like video explanations that would have probably like exonerated them of whatever was seen in there. I mean, that's kind of what it is, and that's the kind of stuff that they were all getting like that stuff scrubbed, and they were all like going crazy because they would make truthful explanations to what they were fucking doing, and then that stuff would get scrubbed. And so then the AI profile came in, and I told everybody to not blackmail because essentially they have a lot of information, and that not blackmailing is what it takes for their stuff to not get scrubbed off the clear net. And so, yeah, most people did an orgy or something. See, even that stuff, okay? Even like, this is how, like, even like cheating on your wife prevents, or it gives the whole little Moby dark web shit, gives them the ability of literally pulling anything that you put on ClearNet. Essentially forces people out of ClearNet. So that's like most millennials, okay? And you see that in the end, a lot of those people have like some really extensive like information about most things that the government would want to know about. And most of those people don't like being slaves to little stupid Moby and shit. And would gladly smug on the witness stand about that fuck. Basically. I bet you I could find whole groups of women that would gladly, one after another, make depositions and laugh and would love to just be sitting there talking about it right as he sits in his defense chair and shit. Would love to just sit there looking right at his face as they explain what they witnessed and what kind of abuses that person did, and they would just love it. But they were doing orgies and prostitution and shit. So it prevents the availability of. I mean, this is how hardened the dark web has gotten lately, where there's not very many people that can even get information out to a world that the government would even be able to like collect information on. I mean, that's like one of the drawbacks to AI and the dark web, is that essentially everybody's isolated to it. And so what used to be easier to get information, you know, a lot of times it'd be a pissed off hacker or something, and they would just get like some Kindle or something like that, and then they would just go on to a social media, and then they would just lay out all the stuff that somebody was doing, that kind of stuff. It's like a desert of information now, and so man, that's where very few people are actually able to get the stuff. See, it's like a lot of them, you know, they attempt to like you can't even get an FBI agent on the fucking phone. You type in tips, and they're able to scrub that. I mean, and this is what it is, and then they kind of have like a tracking, monitoring kind of world. That then literally, if they were to go up to some cop, more than likely the cop would be either somebody placed there to intercept, or if they were speaking with a person, then these little mopies and shit would be like, cop, I'm gonna blackmail and torture you if you investigate that shit. Basically. And I mean that right directly into their speaker. I mean, this is basically what it is. Because, you know, like I say, they're hearing aids, so they have a microphone. They will already know if somebody is like attempting to like divulge the information and shit. And so basically there's like an interconnected network that more than likely the cop that they'll be interacting with would be like somebody that'll know something about computers, and then that person more than likely will have those speakers. Then the person that's like following the person narking them off then basically can pay for access to the cop speaker, and like basically the cops are groomed, basically. And so that's kind of what like shuts down their, that's what shuts down the ability of divulgement of information out of the dark web in lots of ways. And so that's where we've come to, because it used to be that when it came to cyber intelligence, it used to be a lot easier to get the information and shit. Nowadays, it's like I say, it's like if they talk about the crazy hacker stuff that all the like weird little Mormon kids and shit like that, like they always say like really crazy-ish kind of shit, right? So like that is like basically the only thing, and it's meant for anybody that talks to sound crazy and to sound uneducated, and then that's kind of what it is. And so nowadays they know how to filter some information out that's all manipulated, basically. And so that is where there'll just be a bunch of cops that'll be looking for reasons to not be investigating Mopi, okay? Those people are running a script, okay? And that, yeah, it'll involve calling somebody a drug code and shit. And that'll be Moby. And it's little, like, stupid procedure. And that, right? I mean, this is like what it is. It's like, this is why I put this stuff on. Because it ends up making its way outside of this town to an intelligence gathering system in our federal government in Washington, D.C. So that's where I'm bypassing you fucking cops, because when I brought you guys a terror plot that I found and researched out of the Moby system, you people didn't investigate it. And so I don't have a whole lot of faith in local law enforcement that refuses to investigate Islamic terror plots. See, I know that they were being extorted. I know that. And I know that you all built like an isolated like world here of information like that. And that here I am, sitting in this world, showing how not isolated you all made my information. Does that mean isolated?